Security Officer at Bestow, and Phillip Wylie is a hacker from CyCognito and the author of the Pentester BluePrint that hopefully most of you got a copy of today. And George Finney is the Chief Security Officer at SMU, and he has several books, but today he had his book, Project Zero, Trust and Well Aware, and we've got a great group of authors, or two authors, and David is great to be interviewing them. So let's give a round welcome of applause for this group. And I will hand it over to them.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Once again, thank you, FutureCon. Thank you, Kim, for having us here. Really honored to be on stage with Phil Wylie and George Finney. I'm going to be talking a little bit about their books. George, I'm going to start with you. Project Zero Trust. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the mix between the fictional scenario and then tying it into the practical. George, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your personal background, what led you into cybersecurity, and then give us your 30-second on what the book is.
Well, thank you, David. I'm George Finney. I'm the Chief Security Officer for SMU. I've actually been with SMU for most of my career, for the last 20 years this year. I got my start in networking and kind of worked my way up from the email room to the boardroom, I guess. And I've always wanted to be a writer, ever since I was in elementary school. So to be at a place now where I can give back to the community and tell these stories that we've all experienced in the industry back to the next generation of cyber professionals. It's just so amazing. I think that's really what drives me in doing these writing projects. So the book, Project Zero Trust, I got to collaborate with John Kindervag, who created Zero Trust, and we use his design methodology, his maturity model around Zero Trust, to tell a story. So it's the story of a fictional company who goes through their Zero Trust journey, and every chapter is essentially another aspect of your environment that you'll need to apply Zero Trust to, whether it's physical security, ERP, identity, cloud, DevOps, the SOC. All of those aspects, I think, are ripe for opportunities to apply Zero Trust along the way, and hopefully, it's written so a new person coming into security or IT can kind of get their bearings and understand what Zero Trust is all about. But also, there's enough depth there for practitioners who've been in the industry for a while to get something out of it as well.
Very good. And Phillip, you're next. George, will you sign my book while we're sitting here? The Pentester's Blueprint, written by Phillip Wylie, co-authored by Kim Crawley. Excellent book. I think whether you're an aspiring pen tester or you're a CISO, this is a great read because it really gives you a lot of insight into the role of the pen tester and what to expect. Phil, will you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you into cybersecurity, and then give us your 30 seconds on the book?
Sure. Do you want the scenic route?
Sure. Let's try the scenic route.
So way before I ever got into security, when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a career. So I've powerlifted for years, and my friends said, you should be a pro wrestler. So I went to wrestling school and spent a couple years as a pro wrestler. And during that time, I wrestled a 750-pound black bear. So during that time, wow, I got married, and I needed a job with benefits, and it was more conducive to married life and family life. So I went to a trade school, learned AutoCAD, became a CAD draftsman. Did that for a few years, and I found out about sysadmin work. So I found out that it paid about $10 an hour more than what I was making. It looked a lot more interesting. So I ended up making the move over to sysadmin work, then found out about security, and then did network security for a little over a year, moved into application security. And then after that, I ended up moving into pen testing. So the book here, the Pentester BluePrint, there was a lot of books out there that tell you how to become how to learn pen testing, but no one was sharing what you need background-wise, what kind of skill set and knowledge you had. So this book kind of fills that gap. It tells you what you need to know before you learn how to pen test, as well as the certifications and degrees and things helpful towards that, as well as different courses and stuff to teach you pen testing, as well as some books and other resources.
That's great. Fantastic. Will you sign, please? All right, George, let's pivot back to your book. The interesting thing about Project Zero Trust was, oh, you need a pen? Here you go. Interesting thing about Project Zero Trust that I found was that, even if, well, first of all, if you're not interested in implementing a zero trust framework, I would say you will be after you read the book. I want to talk a little bit about your inspiration for Project Zero Trust. But first of all, George, is Dylan your alter ego?
So the cool part about writing a book with characters is I think all of the characters are have some nugget of my personality in them.
Right.
So whether that's Dylan, he's the main character. I think honestly my favorite character is Harmony. There's so many pop culture references in the book. Her whole name is actually Harmony Gold, which is the company that made Robotech. So weirdly, her friends call her Money, Money. Just there's so many interesting things, and I think that's what makes a book relatable. Is finding characters in it that you can see yourself in those shoes, or seeing those folks as a role model. So knowing there's so many folks coming into the cybersecurity industry, making it relatable and approachable for those folks. Having characters is really cool, and if you like them, you'll probably like me too.
Inspiration from the Phoenix Project, was it there? Did it influence you?
Yeah, so for the folks that don't know, there's a great book out there called The Phoenix Project by a fellow named Gene Kim. Very similar. So if you're familiar with DevOps, the Phoenix Project is probably your Bible. My hope, honestly, was I could do the same thing with Zero Trust and have really people understand what Zero Trust is about because of this book. So definitely an influence and inspiration. We took some different angles because Zero Trust and security is so different from DevOps. We took some different angles, but I will say we took a shot at the developers out there. Any developers in the room? There's an awesome joke that John Kindervag says, and I stole for the book. But the DevOps people are the Ricky Bobbies of the world. They just want to go fast.
Yeah. Excellent. Phil, let's pivot over to the Pentester's BluePrint. Talk about your inspiration. But first of all, is Kim Crawley a real person, or is she your alter ego?
Yeah, that's a secret, but yeah, you kind of blew my cover. The inspiration behind the Pentester BluePrint came from teaching at Dallas College, and also along with some mentoring and helping others get started in pen testing over the years. Because prior to teaching at Dallas College, I taught pen testing and web app pen testing there. So prior to that, I would share information with people that wanted to go through the OSCP certification and to become a pen tester. So I'd share these learning resources. But this actually came out of a lecture my first day of class each semester. So I would give this class, this lecture on becoming a pen tester to tell about the role and some of the different certifications and things that were helpful. The first day of class, some of the other instructors at Dallas College would ask me to come in and speak to their cybersecurity students on the topic of pen testing, and I would share that. And this was like January 2018. I gave the lecture the first time. By November of 2018, I gave the talk at the B-Sides DFW conference. So it was the first time giving it as a conference talk. And I gave it at many conferences since then. And I was in the Tribe of Hackers Red Team book, and Wylie Publishing asked me if I had any ideas of any books I'd like to write. And so I had wanted to make a book out of that conference talk. So that's kind of where that came from. And the goal is, with a lot of things I do, is trying to help people get started in cybersecurity. And one of the things that I looked at, and part of the reasons of writing the book too, is I was on the CFP committee one year for B-Sides DFW, and one of the things they said, if this talk's been given before, then yeah, just kind of, we won't take those talks, we'll take others. And I said, if the talk hasn't been given at this conference, you should consider it, because just because it's been given somewhere else doesn't mean anyone has heard it. Because during the pandemic, I did so many virtual talks giving the presentation on the Pentester BluePrint, and so many people I run across never heard it. And so I knew by writing a book was a way to get this information out to people that would never in a million years ever meet you at a conference or would be local, and they could find that information there. So that was part of the mission and reason for writing the book.
Fantastic. And George, why this subject? How did you decide on Project Zero Trust?
So funny story. I thought I was out. I thought I was done writing books, and I got a call from Wylie, and they were like, "Hey, we need someone to write a book on Zero Trust." And my answer to them was like, "Have you met John Kindervag? He's been talking about writing a book. Let me just introduce you all." And I'm texting him. It turns out he's just too busy, and so they said, "Hey, we want you to write." And I got Kindervag to write the foreword. So I kind of had them where I wanted them, and I'm not going to say they wrote me a blank check to just write whatever I wanted, but when I said I want to write it like the Phoenix Project and make it a story, they were like, "Ooh, I don't know about that. That's gonna be hard to pull off." And they believed in the project, and it was just kind of a lightning bolt of inspiration when they called to say like, "No, if I'm going to do it, I've got to tell a story, and I've got to show people what Zero Trust is about instead of just like telling them like all the other marketers out there are talking about Zero Trust."
Fantastic. Is my mic on? Okay. Phillip, tell us a little bit. You have a full-time job. You both do. Tell us a little bit about what it takes to hold on a full-time job and also write a book.
It's just a matter of sacrificing your free time. Some people may have some sports or different hobbies that they do in the evenings, and that's just kind of where I wrote the book. I mean, early in my pen testing career, I spent a ton of time after work, even while I was a pen tester, learning to hack and get better at it. So that's kind of what I do, is spend the evenings. So it took probably close to about a year or so. When I started out writing the book, I had most of it done, about 80%, and my writing style is short and to the point. I don't write a lot of fluff, so they needed at least like 180 pages. So that's when I brought in Kim to help me finish out the book, because pretty much all the pen testing related stuff was in there. She had some great ideas about interviewing different people that were pen testers, getting their advice in their stories, and as well as some other jobs that those skills would relate over to pen testing. But so that was when I had to bring someone in to finish it. And a good lesson there that related to me in other areas of life is learning to help, reach out to others for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I'm bad about doing that sometimes, and that's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned from writing the book.
Okay, and George, what about you? How long did it take you, and how difficult was it to hold down your full-time CISO job and be the author of this book?
Yeah, so I like that connection back to certifications and training, right? In cybersecurity, we need to be lifelong learners. Cyber is always changing more rapidly than maybe we can even catch up. So, that extra time that you're putting in anyway, that was the time that I was putting into writing. So, what I tell my wife is, other guys, will go golfing every weekend, and I took usually 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday to hammer out another few pages, and I've just kind of built that into my mindset. So I'm taking notes during the week. Maybe I actually sacrificed a couple weeks of vacation to pull this off. So it's my 10th book. Okay. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. So this book took about 6 months to pull off, from inception to finish. But other books I've written have taken 3 years. I go to writers' conferences. I've studied writing for a long time. I've taken classes. So, it's definitely something I think anybody can do, right? We all write professionally, emails or whatever for our jobs. And frankly, maybe Chat GPT is going to make that easy on y'all if you decide to be a writer. That might be your first draft. But gosh, I think it's really approachable. What I tell people is even if you write, 1 page a week, right? After 2 or 3 years, you've got a complete book. And I think writing a page a week is approachable. It's something that anybody can do. It's really just a matter of you thinking about what you can uniquely bring back to the cybersecurity community, right? Whether you're, maybe you're not a pen tester, but maybe you're a GRC person. Maybe you're a firewall admin or whatever, that you've got your own stories to tell. Bring that back to the community so that the next generation of cybersecurity professionals aren't learning those lessons from scratch.
So this is number 10. So when do we expect number 11?
So I am pausing on all books. My last book, Well Aware, it was essentially Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Cybersecurity. So I've taken that. We've built a security awareness training company around that. So that's going to be my life for the next few. In my spare time, while I've still got my full-time job, but look us up, Well Aware Security. There's a free cybersecurity personality test, and that's really the foundation of where our training takes cybersecurity awareness.
And what about you, Phillip? Is this book number 1?
Yeah, that's book number 1.
In book number 2, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got an idea for another one. It's just
Okay.
I've been kind of outlining it and probably do like a series of conference talks because it's kind of, since it's come from a lecture and a conference talk, is kind of devise a few talks around that topic that I plan on doing that and present those. And one of the good things about doing it in a conference format is you go to conferences, you get questions, so you kind of get ideas of other things that you can add to the book. So start out doing that and get some ideas and just kind of do it the same way I did the first book.
And what's your advice for someone who's thinking about writing a book?
Yeah, I think you should do it. It's one of the things that was surprising. It was a lot more work than I expected, just commitment-wise. But if you want to do it. And just like anything else, while you're interested in doing it or passionate about it, jump on it then. Don't wait too long. Procrastinate. It may just blow over and you may not ever finish it or start it.
Let's jump into the books, shall we, gentlemen? Okay, George, I'm going to start in your book. I'm going to read an excerpt from this. This is from your chapter, Trust is a Vulnerability.
Trust is a vulnerability.
Trust is a vulnerability. You said you can't have cybersecurity without physical security. If a threat actor can walk into your data center, it's game over. With today's card readers and video surveillance systems, however, you can't have physical security without cybersecurity. Cybersecurity controls for physical security systems are often overlooked. I'm going to pivot real quick to 33. In the scenario that Dylan is working with the team, and Brent asks, but what about the air ducts like in Die Hard? Okay, let's go over to Phillip's book here. I'm gonna read a brief excerpt from the Pentester's Blueprint. This is what you said, Phillip. You said, as a pen tester, you might have to test physical security by crawling through ductwork or trying to pick physical locks. Pen testing physical controls can be a lot of fun. Imitate scenes from Die Hard and pretend you're Bruce Willis. Are you guys fascinated with Die Hard or what?
Die Hard is 100% a Christmas movie. Let's just start there.
Agree or disagree? It's a Christmas movie. Okay.
So, I think in cyber, there's this tendency to forget about physical security as a control, right? If someone can walk right into your data center, you don't have cybersecurity. If someone can walk out with a server, that's a problem. That your SIM or your MSSP isn't necessarily going to let you know about. So, and again, I think applying your zero trust principles to card readers, to your cameras, right? Typically, those are outsourced services to a third-party security company. And when I talk about a third-party physical security company, really, it's just they're just another vendor. But that's a non-technical vendor that doesn't necessarily understand architecture or zero trust. It's really not something that I think we practice in the community enough. I know we've hosted B-sides at our Plano campus years ago. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't gone through a lock-picking workshop at one of these conferences, definitely do that. Like, understand how physical security controls work, and think about how you protect those controls from an architecture perspective, from an EDR perspective, and make sure those are included in your program.
Yeah, so we were talking about this earlier today, and one of the questions I had asked you was, do you think that there's a gap in cybersecurity knowledge where physical security portion is often overlooked? If you come to enough of these conferences, all the talks are on ransomware and viruses and risk management and delivering metrics to the board. All right, good job, guys. I love it. And I think I was asking that question, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking there's absolutely a gap. I mean, even among some of our own peers, I've had conversations and they've asked me what I'm doing for physical security on this or that. And I do think it's a real problem. I want to read another sentence from George's book, and I want to get your thoughts on it as a pen tester. This is in the chapter Every Step Matters, page 160. George says, "We chose physical security as one of the learning protect services because it is so often overlooked when it comes to security." And I believe that's true. What are your thoughts on this, Phil, from a pen tester's viewpoint?
Yeah, it definitely is, because one of the things we do as pen testers is test physical controls. And most of the pen tests that I've done usually don't include the physical part.
Yeah.
And used to, whenever we would do a pen test report, we'd always look at things outside of the scope of the pen test, things that we'd observe. And some companies that I did pen tests for would have really great physical controls, and some would have really lax. And sometimes those would be some of the items that would find themselves into the report, because you go into some place, everything's super secure, but yeah, they've got like no kind of man traps coming into the building. There's no kind of access controls to prevent people from coming in. It's really easy to tailgate. And so those are some of the things there that get overlooked. And as George kind of mentioned in the book too, is someone's able to get access to the server room, to the keyboard, someone logged in with a high level of privilege. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a good hacker. And that's one of the things you have to look at. Sometimes the hackers aren't always the highest skill. They're just sometimes, the most resourceful. They find a keyboard open as admins, domain admin or root, and get access. You don't have to be a really good hacker to do that. So we have to take advantage of that. And you take in case a lot of these insider threats. Someone's inside the company that's been implanted from a nation state. You're trying to get access to that stuff, or someone's just curious or disgruntled employee. So we need to make sure that we're watching the physical. And one of the things that's interesting too, when you look at information security back from like the beginnings, protecting files, that was one of the things that they really looked at. Clean desk rule, make sure file cabinets are locked. Files are in an area that's locked and, protected by camera and card access and stuff that way. And we need to look at the same thing for all assets, including digital assets as well.
Very good. So what can we do to close the gap? Are there resources that you would point to? Questions for both of you. Resources you can recommend for the cybersecurity practitioner who may not have the hands-on experience in the physical security realm. Where do you point them to? You have some ideas?
Yeah, as far as some really good resources, Deviant Ullum has a YouTube channel on physical pen testing, and he's got some really interesting tools. A lot of times you think lockpicks, but he uses other tools to gain access to buildings. So that's some really good resources to look there. And just as far as just looking at the environment, think how easy it is to get into somewhere, how someone's able to tailgate in, and that sort of thing, and just kind of monitor that.
So how many of y'all are customers of a camera company called Verkada? No one? Good. So think about your security controls, your cameras. Sometimes it'll be an outsourced, security guard company that's running your cameras or your card readers. We have an integrator, and even them, they wanted to just put our cameras and card readers on public IP addresses because it was convenient for them, right, to get in and to get out. And we're like, wait, hang on. We've got 3,000 cameras on campus. We don't want camera footage of our students ending up on TMZ. We thought about architecture. Right. Think about, if you're walking in your building, look at the model number of your card reader and find out that vendor plus breach or vulnerability. Right. Think about those things the same way you would do any other vulnerability. Then think about where those go. Right. So you can watch YouTube videos of folks pulling those off the wall, and they can actually intercept card reads with a little simple, Raspberry Pi device to collect, things going in. We're not even intercepting prox badges necessarily, because the card reader swipes are unencrypted between the card reader and the server for the most part. The new standard OSDP has not been fully deployed yet, and it's buggy as heck. So think about the whole process, and that's what we talk about in Project Zero Trust is map your transaction flow from end to end and understand where your vulnerabilities are. You've got to understand how the business works probably better than anyone else in the business to be able to secure it. It really takes us just being curious and asking questions and taking the time to think about, well, what's this really doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember being conducting years ago, doing pen testing on subsidiaries and finding the security camera system that I could just get to the login screen, use password for the password and admin for the user, and I'd get into the security cameras. And you don't think of it. You get the facilities guy who puts the AV system in and then slaps an iPad on the wall and puts it on the network, and it's all wide open. Stuff like that happens if you have a facility that you, from your perspective, you must love that kind of stuff because it's low-hanging fruit, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes it pretty easy, and even default credentials, sometimes the installer puts it in there, and sometimes the intent is for the owner of the building because the installer doesn't need to know those passwords, intend for them to change it, and they don't. A lot of times we have to be careful with temporary passwords and things, or when people are setting up systems to make it easy to log in, use easy credentials or default credentials, and then an attacker comes along and makes it easy. A lot of times people give threat actors too much credit. Sometimes they're really not all that good. They're just opportunistic. They go in, they try something, they're in. They may not be some lead hacker. They're just someone that just right place, right time, tried something and got in. You hear some of these schools getting hacked and different things going on. And sometimes it really wasn't because someone was all that great. Is there were no access controls on that file share. Someone just went to that network directory and got in.
Just to add to that, a lot of our organizations use, the commercial facilities card readers, right? So if you're renting commercial space in a building, did you put your own card reader system in, or are you using theirs? And if you're using theirs, that's a third-party vendor management conversation, right? What controls or what questions are you able to ask? And if they don't have good answers, what's your question back to the business, right? Do you have the ability to say, no, we can't use that space before we move in, or we've got to do a forklift upgrade? Those are really interesting questions to have with your business owners, and to bring that to light is a real value we can bring. But it takes us asking those questions.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit. I want to read a little bit of from Pentester BluePrint, and we'll talk about that. I was trying to find, I remember reading in here, and I can't remember it verbatim, but I just want to briefly touch on it. You talked about the person who is an aspiring pen tester doing a self-assessment, basically a self-gap. And I read it, and I was like, okay, there it is in writing. I remember when I decided I wanted to be a CISO, I did that. And I did an honest assessment of where I was lacking in skills, and I sought to fill those gaps so that I would be prepared for the CISO role, but I didn't read it anywhere. It was just something that I thought I needed to do in order to be ready for that role. You talk about that in here and spend some time giving the advice to the aspiring pen tester. Look, do your own self-assessment, find those gaps. Was that something that you read somewhere? Was it just something that you've done for yourself? Tell us a little bit how you came up with that.
Yeah, just something I kind of came up with, because just like we use gap analysis in other areas of IT and security, I thought it was a good place to apply that. Look at what you need, what you need to learn, what you know, and then taking that and kind of creating your own little blueprint to gain the skills you need to become a pen tester.
And George, what are your thoughts on that?
I love that concept, doing your own self-assessment, right? Where are you at? And not every, like one of the previous speakers talked about, one of the ransomware actors didn't change their passwords, right? How many of y'all use LastPass? Okay, how many of y'all changed all of your passwords after the LastPass breach? Right, that's what we've got to do. And if you're not constantly thinking about that as a security person, I think we have to challenge ourselves to do what we're asking our organizations to do, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's read a little bit, an excerpt, a couple of related concepts from your book. Chapter 6, certifications and degrees. You said opinions differ, however, on the need for degrees and certifications. There are skilled and successful pen testers both with and without degrees or certifications. A little later in the chapter, you said pen testing specific degrees are hard to find at the college and university level, and that is so true. And here's something else that I have found is, if you go look at a lot of the job descriptions for the companies that are hiring for pen testers, they will put requirements like a bachelor's degree in there, and then they want a pen tester with experience. It's like, okay, are they expecting you to have what kind of degree? Because do you think that the hiring personnel understand that degree is not going to be in pen testing?
Yeah, well, job descriptions and HR writing job descriptions that could be a whole panel there in itself. But I think when they're looking for the degrees, they're wanting something in computer science or security or something along that lines. But yeah, as far as I know, I think SANS is the only one that has an actual degree in pen testing. You may find some pen testing courses at a college, but no degree on it. But just back to that topic, it's just really interesting to see some of the best in the industry have 0 certifications or degrees. But one of the things too is, like, this is not saying don't get certifications or degrees. Everyone does something different. And the value to a degree is if you're having a hard time figuring this out on your own, this is where this book comes in handy. Here's what you need to do to become a pen tester. But some people that have a hard time getting started, if you do go to a college, then you got things laid out, more structured. You got timelines that you have to complete these tasks, do your exams and all this to complete it. Sometimes if you're not good at self-study, then that may be an option, something more structured, or a certification. Because one of the things, just because you have a certification sometimes doesn't mean you're good or you necessarily know what you're doing. But one of the things it does, I know a lot of people that went through the OSCP that didn't take the exam. And I think one of the reasons to take the exam for any of those certifications is it pushes you to work harder to learn the subject. You may go through all the steps in the certification process, but did you really learn it well enough? And an exam is going to test your knowledge, that you're making sure that you learn. Like for me, going through the OSCP, it took me more than one attempt to pass it. If I would have just taken the course and stopped there, I wouldn't have learned as much. I had to push a little bit harder to be able to pass the exam.
Can I add to that? Sure. So I know this is a little awkward for me to say since I work for a university, but I worry, frankly, about folks that go through a cybersecurity program, because in a way you've had all of those things nicely lined up for you along the way, but after you get out, what habits have you developed to stay current? Right, a lot of security programs necessarily are maybe a few years out of date, and if you need someone to handhold you, gosh, that I actually prefer. Someone who is a self-starter, who's curious, who has their own home lab, and that I think is way more valuable than the degree itself, right? So I've actually removed the degree requirement from all of my job descriptions. I removed certification requirements from, and frankly, I had to fight HR on this. So you know, I think, you know, it's worth fighting for, because I've seen, after I've done that, my candidate pools open up from, you know, 5 or 10 applicants and maybe 1 or 2 are interesting, to having 100 or 200 applicants that, man, I want to go to SMU and I want to get my degree. I want to get those other certs that you guys can provide. That's an opportunity for recruiting to get new people into the industry. And I think collectively, as a leadership, you know, group in cybersecurity, we've got to be doing that to get more people in the industry.
Yeah, I think it can be overwhelming for someone who's trying to break into the industry to try to navigate the job description waters when there's no alignment, there's weird requirements, there's, you know, entry level position with 5 years experience required. Oh, what are they supposed to do with that? I think your book helps with that. And I want to point real quickly to the blueprint formula that you have here. You said these 3 elements make up the Pentester blueprint: technology knowledge, hacking knowledge, plus hacker mindset equals the Pentester blueprint formula. And you kind of walk through the path that they can take to gain both education and experience in the industry that will help them hopefully pivot that into a pen tester job. But what is the level of, I mean, you talk to a lot of aspiring pen testers and you've got your own podcasts and things like that. What's the frustration level of job seekers, and how has your book helped some of them?
Just kind of seeing where to start. And the interesting thing is, I run into some people that have been in the industry for a while, or people that are pen testers that have learned something from the book. But I think really with some of the major frustrations is like some of the job descriptions, the way in. I think sometimes there's not enough entry-level opportunities. And just as you mentioned, the 5 years for entry level, I think people need to get really better about writing these job descriptions, be more accurate. If it's really, don't call it, I think sometimes it's labeled as entry level because that's what they're paying you, entry level, but they want someone that's mid-level experience. But just kind of breaking in is one of the things that is kind of most difficult. But one of the things that's difficult too is getting the hands-on experience that you need to be a pen tester. It is kind of hard to get that. And some of the things I lay out, doing CTFs, doing things like try hack me and hack the box to gain those hands-on hacking skills, doing bug bounties, signing up with companies like Cobalt for their pen test as a service. That way you basically, if you have the skills, you take the skills assessment and you're in there working. There's no requirement for any experience. You prove you can do the job, you can get it. And a lot of times in real world, some of these full-time jobs, you could be able to do everything that needs to be done, but they won't accept it because you don't have this experience. Yeah.
George?
So definitely, if you're in a university program, we have the collegiate cyber defense competition, CCDC. Those are great opportunities for undergrads to go get pen testing experience. Immersive labs, love those guys, right? That's hands-on experience training that you can get access to. So there's so many opportunities out there to get. I think you just have to be motivated to go after them.
Very good.
And to add to the list he's mentioned, the colleges, if you're going to a college, participate in National Cyber League. And because a lot of times from the CCDCs and National Cyber Leagues, they'll hire from people at list, they see how they perform. And the good thing, one of the things about National Cyber League is you can do it solo. If you don't get a team together, you can do it on your own. And you actually start out solo, and then you get into a team once they get into the finals. But it's really great. One of the nice things about National Cyber League, too, is that outside of just pen testing, you learn about cryptography and some other helpful skills in cybersecurity. So it's kind of a way to push people to learn some of these things they need to know that some of these, pen testing courses may not cover adequately.
Fantastic. So there's one more portion of George's book that I want to share with you, and we'll discuss it briefly. But before that, I want to tell you, part of your book, I think, triggered some PTSD in me. I think there's a lot of the discussion about the early stages of the scenario where they were realizing that they had a breach. That brought back some memories, and I'm sure that's pretty familiar feeling for a lot of us who are more experienced, because A lot of our success today is based off of the pain that we went through in the past. But you talk about, in the book, you show a progression of how to prepare for that. And one of those ways is through the tabletop exercises. In chapter 10, you dedicated the entire chapter to tabletop exercises. And I just want to briefly read a portion of this and kind of get your guys' thoughts on this. On the key takeaways section, you said tabletop exercises are always critical to any good security program. Just like every commercial building in the country is required to conduct a fire drill, businesses should regularly test their incident response plans in a simulated fashion. This helps every team member who may be involved in a real incident to understand what their role is on the team and gives them a safe way to practice. And then you go on to talk about incorporating red teaming. You said to perform a more complex type of tabletop known as a live fire drill. Live fire exercise involves penetration testers performing their own activity in coordination with the moderator. I think that's a beautiful idea. I've never personally done it. What's your experience in doing that?
It's super hard to pull off
Yeah.
in real life. And I think one of the things and I would love to hear your feedback on this, Phil. But I think we're not getting value out of pen testing in general if we're just looking at black box, right? And I think a lot of CISOs, a lot of security leaders see the pen test reports as like a pat on the back, like, hey, we didn't have any findings, and and they make it hard. I actually think all the value out of pen testing comes from the findings that you get, right? Getting better every time. And so there's some pen tests called like a compromise assessment or a breach assessment where the goal isn't to test a specific app, it's to exfiltrate data. So aligning that with a tabletop exercise so that you can kind of see, hey, is our SOC instrumented to even detect this kind of activity that we're talking about? They got an alert, cool. Well, what do they do with it? Do they know who to escalate to? Can they do correlation? So I think if you're and there are different types of tabletop exercises. Obviously, you've got tabletop exercises for your leadership team, and then maybe you've got more technical ones for your IT team. But I think it takes both. And frankly, again, like I want to have a tabletop exercise for every employee in my company and make it interactive and help bring them up as well. So it's I don't want to be an exclusive tabletop, but there's so many ways to do that to get value these days.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, something I haven't been involved in, but I think that's a great idea because from the red team perspective, if you can show the defenders, even just people that work in IT and other areas of the company, what to look for in this malicious activities, the red team are going to be the ones that's going to have an understanding of that. If you can kind of get it into their minds, these suspicious activities, so then they're going to be better prepared to report it or block it. Even if they're, even you mentioned all levels, that would be great to get other people involved outside of even IT. Because if you're seeing this stuff, there's how many cases can you imagine where someone is trying to tailgate into the building or doing other suspicious activities? If you kind of go over that stuff, then it's kind of a good way to educate just the regular end user on suspicious activities, and then more likely that it's going to be reported, because we do that so much with phishing, but you forget physical security and some other aspects of digital security when you're doing those type of drills.
Yeah. And the last time I was getting ready for, just a side note, tabletop exercises, doing some research to prep for it. You can go out to YouTube and find other people have published some of their full video of their tabletop exercise. FEMA was one of the ones I watched that was out there, and some of them are good, some of them are not so good, but you can learn from them if you're trying to get some ideas for conducting tabletop. Okay, why don't we go to the audience for some questions? Is there anybody have questions for one of our authors? Hold on a second. Let's get you to raise your hand, and the man with the mic will come over. This gentleman right over here is first. I couldn't hear you, sir, so we'll get you mic'd up.
So what do you think of the USB approach? The USB key.
You mean like a USB key drop in a parking lot?
Yeah.
So I personally don't like that as a scenario to test, and here's why. when you put malware on a USB key and somebody else other than someone in your company picks it up and takes it to their company, I think you've just hacked another company and you're liable for that.
And this is important to note that George has his JD. So you're hearing this from a lawyer / CISO.
This is not legal advice. I am not your lawyer.
No. More often than not, you end up finding out that you're getting in from the outside through a VPN connection to the office. That happens more often because they don't want to bring it into the office to find out what's on it.
Yeah, again, if someone puts that in their personal computer, I've got real concerns about that. So we actually found that at SMU. We didn't do a USB drop, but we found somebody clicked a link and it turned out that they were accessing from another university, and we're like, oh no, like okay, and we worked it out. But yeah, you've got to be aware of those kinds of issues that'll crop up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because that's the common practice in some of the physical assessments and stuff. But an interesting fact that someone in the local Dallas community that's really highly skilled at using USBs said the way they were able to get people to more successfully plug that USB into their computer was to put it in a personal item. So put it in a purse, a wallet, or something like that, and people were more likely to check it. Maybe in some cases they're wanting to see who owns the personal object that they found it in, but he said he had a lot better likelihood of someone actually using that USB drive when doing that.
Okay, this gives me another book idea for you guys. And I think you should write it jointly. And let me start with the title. Wrestling Bears and Other Stupid Things Pen Testers Shouldn't Do. And bear with me. So George, you'll use your lawyer power and talk about, you can roll in the indictment of the Mandiant folks for the pen testers. You could talk about thumbsucker drives, the do's and the nots, and then from the pen tester's point of view, what do you guys think? And I don't want any royalty. All I ask is that you dedicate the book to me. Will you do it? Okay, this is...
Hell no.
We have another question over here.
Yeah, this question is about the Audible book for Zero Trust, the project Zero Trust. And I don't know if there's an Audible book for the pen testing one or not. If you could maybe just tell us a little bit about just the inside baseball on, do you get to pick the voice talent? Do you give them any directions on accents to use, or are they just that crazy on their own?
So thank you for that. The coolest part about Project Zero Trust is that we got one of the actors from The Walking Dead to be the narrator for Project Zero Trust. So it's an amazing. He did a phenomenal job. I did not get to pick him. They just randomly. I even asked, like, hey, do I get to pick and they were like, nah, we outsourced that. They do a good job. We're not even going to ask questions.
Was it just one of the zombies?
No. So if you're a fan of the show, it's Alan from season 3 and 4. He was killed unceremoniously by Negan, like right in the beginning. Yeah. So check it out. Project Zero Trust on Audible.
Excellent. Good question.
If I would have had someone to do the voice and I could have picked, because my book is actually out on Audible, I would have got James Earl Jones. Have Darth Vader read your book. Yeah.
Very good. Do we have time? Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah. Hey.
Over here? Yes,
Hey.
sir.
I think David knows I'm pretty passionate about IR, but I think I've been doing IR for the last 10 years, and threats have kind of changed over time, and so the engagements that I'm working now are more like web and API security based, whereas like maybe 5-10 years ago it was all like Windows vulnerabilities or OpenRDP or something like that. Are you able to like provide some insight on what you think based on how business is going and how like your kind of companies and your institution is structured, like what the threats are going to be like in the next 5 to however many years?
It's funny you say RDP because I know a lot of organizations have lost their cyber risk insurance altogether because they don't block RDP at the border, right? They don't require just a minimum VPN, right? I think there's just such a spectrum today of maturity when it comes to security and zero trust that I think it's hard to pin anyone down on what practices they're doing and where they're at in that journey. But yeah, I think there's still the old style issues that are happening. And then the larger organizations that they're more mature, but they're still facing even greater challenges in part because they're being attacked by more sophisticated attackers. And even if you don't have good security today, you're still getting attacked by the good attackers or the sophisticated attackers. You just don't know about it.
Yeah, I can just add to that. You can see just from the more people moving to cloud from on-prem that it makes sense that those are kind of the targets now. But one of the things too is that also shows that we need to make sure, because the company I work for, CyCognito, we're an external attack surface management product. But one of the things just working there and seeing some of the things with our clients, we've seen PLCs exposed to the internet. So we really need to watch what we're exposing to the internet, not even just RDP stuff like PLCs and other things. And APIs, APIs are sometimes required to be exposed to the internet, but we need to make sure our APIs that aren't supposed to be exposed aren't exposed.
I think we have time for one more, maybe two more questions.
I'm right here.
Sherelle.
So just to pivot a little bit, we know that cybersecurity is the main return on investment in cyber is protecting your organization, right, from ransomware. It's a big spend. You don't get anything out of it. How do you present to leadership to get them to sign the big check to implement a zero trust policy within the organization?
So if you're pushing cybersecurity as just another loss, I think it's really hard to justify your existence. For us at SMU, security matters to our community, right? It matters to the parents sending kids, I think maybe not every business can position it this way, but cyber is a competitive advantage. Security is a competitive advantage for your business, and you've got to be thinking about it that way and telling your story that way.
You talk about that a little bit in the book about selling zero trust. So you should read the book. It's interesting.
That's a good note to close on. Read the book.
I think are we doing a time, or do we have time for one more?
One more.
Wait, wrap it.
Well, it may be pretty rapid. I was curious whether either of you have explored the topic of vehicle hacking.
I have not.
I haven't really explored it myself, but Alyssa Knight has a really good book on it. And for someone wanting to learn more about it, the bug bounty community has some great content on it. I think, there's like a car hacking village at DEF CON they usually have. But it's getting to be interesting. There was a recent bug found by a security researcher, actually Sam Curry, I believe, that I know him from Bug Crowd. And they found an API that affected BMW, all these other different cars. And one of the things before, they were looking at more of the wireless and what you could do up close. But now the APIs are in the picture. There's so much more that people are able to exploit through those vulnerabilities.
And on that note, I think we need to close things out.
I got one more question that's on that.
I don't even see where you are.
Right here.
Oh, right in front.
Yeah,
Okay.
On a new approach in nation state hacking, what I've noticed is there's a new process that most people are totally unaware about, and that is the OMG cable. The ability to have everything you need in a cable that you're going to access, whether it's a car, whether it's your computer, what have you, because of the fact that it takes advantage of the keyboard assignment. And the fact is that once you do that, they have a remote access Trojan access to your machines. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's and those cables too look exactly like a regular cable, so it's going to be hard. As an end user and as organizations, we need to be careful what we're allowed into our devices. But yeah, those are pretty hard. I haven't really heard I don't know if you've heard of any actual attacks where people are using that, but I know even just like going to the airports and stuff, using the charging stations for USBs, people could play, still the same attack vector. So as far as end users, we need to be careful and use some of the protective devices as far as enterprises go, try to disable USB when you can to prevent those type of things. It's interesting because Jason Street was talking about a test he did. He went in somewhere and he had one of those OMG cables, and he was asking people to plug it in, do whatever, and he's right in front of them and hacking their machines, and with their help, not even doing it when they're away. So yeah, it's a very dangerous vector.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, especially if you ship like a box of cables somewhere under the guise of this is just regular cables. That's a very dangerous thing. So that gets back to, yeah.
thank you, everybody,
Good
for
point.
your attendance. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you, authors, taking time out of your busy day to talk to us about your books. They're both wonderful books. I highly recommend them. Thank you.